everyone, and welcome to the podcast, Smart Man, Smarter Woman, a podcast for entrepreneurs, by entrepreneurs, and thank you very much for joining us today. I am Steve Lotes.
And I am Juliet Aurora.
And we are your co-hosts. And before I introduce today's guest, let's hear a few words from my wonderful co-host, that smarter woman herself, Juliet. What's new today, Juliet?
Oh, so many things. So many things are new. We could probably spend like 40 minutes talking about what's new, so I'm not going to do that. I'm looking forward to the episode today because I always love talking with fellow Canadians, no disrespect to any of our international guests. And I always love talking to women who hold similar empowered women values as I do. And our guest today does. And I think that it's going to be a great conversation. So I don't even want to take up any more of the time. Let's dive in.
Perfect. Well, that's great. So that sounds like to me that this might be a pretty light episode for me, that I may be able to just step to the side and you two will just be having the conversation for that. And I love those episodes, quite honestly. And probably our listeners do too, but that's a whole other story.
Yeah, that's a whole other story.
Yes, it is. Anyway, so as always, we've put together a great show for you today, and we're joined by, as Juliet said, a fellow Canadian and also a fellow podcaster. And so without further ado, let's bring Karen into the show. Karen Swyszcz, welcome, and thank you very much for joining us today, Karen.
Thank you so much, Steve and Juliet, for having me on the show. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. And I did love it and I don't remember if I read this on your website or your LinkedIn profile, but I did love your explanation of your career path. I thought that was very original, that it was a combination of zigzags and squiggles. And I've never heard anyone describe their career path as with squiggles. So I'm very interested to hear about that. She's a blogger, a college educator, a fitness instructor, a podcast host, and a best-selling author. So certainly got a few things going on, going to keep you out of trouble, and I'm sure keep you busy. So perhaps to begin, Karen, if you could tell us a little bit who you are, what you do, who you're helping, and a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey that got you to where you are today.
Yeah, it's really interesting because honestly, if you had talked to me 10 years ago, I never would have thought in a million years that I'd be pursuing this type of path. I grew up with the idea, my parents were like, go to school, get good grades, get into a good university, have a job, work there 25, 30 years. You'll be set for life. And I thought, okay, that's what I'll do because that's what my parents did. So just to add a little bit more info, neither of my parents are entrepreneurs. I don't come from an immediate family of entrepreneurs, but the interesting thing is that I have entrepreneurs in my extended family on both sides. So perhaps, I got it from them. Going back to my journey. So as Steve had mentioned, reading in my bio that my career path resembles squiggles, zigzags. I also like to tell people it's kind of like a rock climbing wall. So, when you're rock climbing, you don't necessarily have to, you reach for the one above you in order to get further along. Sometimes you have to go down, sometimes you have to go back. So after university, just trying to figure out what I wanted to do in so many different jobs, careers. I even applied to grad school twice, thinking maybe if I went back to school, it would give me better insight. It didn't. I think the turning point was when I landed a job with the federal government. It was very monotonous, not a lot of variety in the role. So I actually started a blog as a passion project. It was also a way to think maybe I could make a little bit of money from it. And what I had really found is that it helped rekindle my love for writing. So as a kid, I was pretty creative. I enjoyed writing stories and poems, but that was never really encouraged when I was growing up. It was more look for a more stable type of career like doctor, lawyer, engineer, accountant. So it was interesting getting into blogging. I find I really enjoyed writing, just kind of sharing my experiences. And yeah, not only that, I ended up developing a lot more skills like how to use WordPress, setting up a blog, using social media, developing partnerships. And then it got to the point in my government job where I thought like, oh, can I see myself working there for 25, 30 years? And it got to a point where I actually used my blog as leverage. So I started applying to jobs at like startups to get a job that was like different from what I was doing, that was hopefully similar to what I was blogging. So I ended up getting a job at a startup, worked there for about a year and a half, and then got let go. And sometimes when you're let go, you're at that turning point. Okay, do I look for another job? Do I start off doing something on my own? And for some reason, I had this little nagging feeling. It was already kind of growing in me. And I think it had to do with, being in a startup environment. And I thought, okay, maybe I'll just go and do it on my own. So I did consulting for about 3 years. And during that time, landed a job at Sheridan College teaching, of all things, blogging, which is kind of interesting because there is no blogging degree or blogging school, but a lot of people realize the value of building an online presence. And yeah, from there, it just ended up pursuing, like having the confidence to pursue other opportunities. Like, hey, why don't I start a podcast? Hey, I'm going to like co-found a social venture. Okay, there's an opportunity to become a best-selling author. I've never written a book, but it was on my goal to, write a book eventually. So, hey, like, why not? So yeah, just here I am taking risks, building things, and yeah, just putting myself out there.
I love that. And I can so relate to that, the directive, not the influence from your family and your upbringing of, lawyer, doctor, engineer. So my sister, I grew up in a similar environment. My sister was the lawyer, so that was eliminated for me. So I had, doctor, engineer, accountant were basically the ones that were left. So I can completely relate to that story. Love it.
Yeah, and that there's a bit of similarity there too with the writing.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. No, that's great. And your podcast. Why did you start the podcast? I mean, it's a lot of work.
Yes. That's a really good question. And I think these days, as you know, I feel ever since the start of the pandemic, like podcasting has exploded. A lot of people are starting podcasts now because it's a great way we can still connect with each other. So for me, I actually didn't really have too much of a plan, which was kind of similar as to starting the blog. I didn't have this vision. I'm like, oh, I'm going to do this in 5 years with my blog. I just kind of was like, okay, I'm going to start this, try it, see what happens and go from there. And with podcasting, as we had mentioned, but prior to recording this episode, it was a labor of love, a lot of work. And looking back on it, I think one of the reasons why I wanted to start it was because I really enjoyed learning about other people. So on my blog, I have this interview series it was originally called How Are You Making the Bacon, where I'd interview guests about their career paths, if they had their own business. And I feel I've always been a naturally curious person asking questions. Well, like, how'd you do this? Or how'd you find about this? Like, who did you talk to? And with the podcast, I thought it was a great way to kind of extend that series or have it in a different format, because people know me via my writing, but I know a lot of people don't really know me through my voice, and they kind of get a sense of who I am. And it's funny because people have listened to my podcast and they're kind of surprised. They're like, you have a like energy, or you sound like you're not introverted, but I actually am very introverted. And I think one of the things people don't realize with introverts is I think we're really good in small groups, one-to-one conversations. But when you put us in a huge group, like a party, that's where we get all anxious. But the funny thing is, though, when you think about it, even though I'm conversing with the two of you, obviously, like when this comes out, like a lot of people will be listening to it, but it's just like, I'm not speaking in front of a large group. So yeah, just kind of to sum everything up, I just wanted to have more conversations, especially with like entrepreneurs, people in the startup world, just learn more about how they got through that path, because no two paths are the same. And sometimes you hear those entrepreneurs like, yeah, I was, I had that lemonade stand when I was 5 and I was, selling things to kids at school. Like, I was not one of those kids. I laugh about it because do you remember with the fundraisers we have to sell chocolate almonds? I think that was one of the, I made my poor parents do it. So I would like tell them, give them the form and be like, Mom, Dad, can you like take this to work and ask your coworkers? So I guess it was kind of like outsourcing already. So yeah, it's just really interesting.
So I'll even take that one step further, because I'm also an introvert, is that I wouldn't even ask my parents to take it to work. I would convince my parents to buy all my requisite chocolates that I needed to sell for my team. So yeah, absolutely.
I do love that concept of outsourcing. I think that's a great analogy. I've never heard it quite put like that before.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you didn't have a plan, and you said that both about your blog and your podcast, that you didn't have a plan, you didn't have like the formal business plan that everybody tells you need to have before you start a business, and that your philosophy was kind of start it, try it, and then decide. So based on that as your experience, and based on the conversations that you've had with other entrepreneurs, have you found that you've gone kind of down a different path, or it follows a different series of steps than someone who might have had a plan and ended up somewhere else?
Yeah, I mean, like I would say so just using the example of the social venture. So that was really an idea, like asking another entrepreneur, like, hey, where are Filipino entrepreneurs? There's a large Filipino population in the Greater Toronto area. And we thought, okay, let's have an event and see what happens. And it was interesting because at the time we had never planned on taking it further. It was just like, hey, let's just try this one thing. And lo and behold, it ended up gaining traction every time. Like that one event, that initial event, people were like, that was a really great event. Thank you so much for putting this on. When's your next event? And then I thought to myself, I never planned, or we didn't plan on having another event. It's just a one-time thing. But then seeing or hearing from other people, learning that it really provided them a lot of value, we thought, okay, maybe we might be onto something. And it was funny because every time we did an event, that was always asked, they said, I'm looking forward to the next event. And then more people began to reach out to us, wanting to like collaborate with us. And it was just really interesting because a lot of the time, sometimes when you don't even have a plan, you just have an idea, let's see where this goes. Sometimes that can work out in your favor, and people end up also, thinking that it's a great idea as well.
And I think also it probably leaves you open to changing direction. Mm-hmm. If you have the set vision or plan in your head, and you spent all this time or money developing a business plan of what your business needs to look like in 2 years, you tend not to pay as much attention to external factors because you think, this is what I need to do. I've got it laid out. I don't need to change direction or anything. So it probably makes you a lot more adaptive to what's happening in the environment as well. Do you agree? Do you disagree?
Yeah, I definitely agree. And what's really funny, because actually growing up, I was that person's like, okay, it's got to be perfect. We have like step 1, step 2, step 3. I got to follow it. And then like everything's going to be successful. So of course, after university, you realize like real life is absolutely nothing like that. And I think ever since I started my blog, especially ever since I joined the startup, I realized how important it is to be adaptable. And especially now, like during these unprecedented times during COVID, like being adaptable will get you very far in life.
True. And like you said, especially now, because all of us are floating in the unknown. We have no idea what next week, next month, next year is going to look like. I think, and I was having this conversation with someone else yesterday, that back in March, we all figured, by, June, July, life would go back to normal and it would be exactly the same way as it was previously. And now predictions are, like September 2021, maybe early 2022 before things get back to normal. But it can't possibly be different for 18 months and your normal look like it did before on the other side. And so if you are stuck to, here's my plan, I have no idea what to do because I have a plan and it doesn't work, then you are going to have a much more difficult time what the next 18 months are going to look like for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, if 2020 has taught us anything, I think it has absolutely convinced, even perhaps some of the non-believers that the ability to pivot is absolutely key to success. That, you cannot walk around with blinders on because it's not going to work. Karen, you've, in your young life, you've tried writing, teaching, blogging, podcasting. Of those, which one do you have I guess it's like, picking your, who's your favorite child, right? It's really hard to do. Do you have a favorite out of all of those?
Yeah, you know what? It is like, picking your favorite child. To be honest, I wouldn't say I have a favorite, or maybe it depends on the day. Like some days I'll like podcasting better than writing, but I feel I've always been a multi-passionate person. Like even as a kid, I really enjoyed a lot of things. I always had a lot of different interests. And I remember in university, when you had the option of choosing electives, I was like, I need more space to take electives because I want to learn this. Like, even though I started off in engineering, but I switched over to science. Even though I was taking science, which is kind of like a more technical, scientific discipline, I took courses in like French and Spanish because I loved learning about languages. I took sociology and psychology. So yeah, it really is hard to pick one thing. And you know what? I don't think that will ever change, to be honest. I feel the more things I take on and the more people I talk to, I feel, more interests are being uncovered.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
We will continue with our conversation right after this message from a friend of the show. AIS Solutions is an award-winning cloud accounting firm serving small business all across Canada. If you want to migrate to a powerful and effective paperless accounting system and get your financials wherever you are, whenever you want them, then contact AIS Solutions team of trained professionals today at www.aissolutions.ca. And now, back to our conversation.
So blogging obviously is kind of what started you on this entrepreneurial journey. Can you speak to our audience of entrepreneurs? There has been, that was the big buzzword that every business needed a blog. You needed to be able to write a blog and have a blog for your business to succeed. Can you speak to that? Like this is something that you do as your full-time career. One of your full-time careers, I guess.
Yeah.
What about those businesses who blogging isn't their business? What would be the advantages or disadvantages of them trying to start a blog?
So just for clarification, I wouldn't say it was like blogging full-time, but more kind of doing like consulting, so advising people to blog. So I was doing that between 2017 to 2020. So just to make sure I understand the question correctly, you're asking whether like what are the advantages and disadvantages of entrepreneurs starting a blog?
If you're running a business where you're selling a product, is there an advantage for them to blogging as well? Yes.
And I think one of the popular misconceptions is that people automatically assume, and I think this also goes with social media, if you publish a social media post, if you publish a blog, like, okay, people are going to like buy my product. But the thing is, how I like to think of it is that when you're blogging, you're kind of like starting a conversation. It's more like you're nurturing that relationship with the potential customer client, telling them like, hey, I have this product, and really addressing their pain points, like saying like, this is how it's going to help you, or here's how my services can help you. So I really do feel it is to your advantage, but I do understand that for a lot of entrepreneurs, number one, they might be really busy and that blogging might not be their strong suit. So you can always look into having other people guest post or look into hiring staff writers. However, I do want to also add that with respect to like let's say your entrepreneurial toolkit, I believe that written communication is really important because again, when you think about it, now that a lot of people are spending a lot of time online, they're researching things, I think you get the impression when somebody is very articulate, okay, they have very strong verbal communication skills, but written communication skills, I think, are really important. So through blogging, you can help further develop those written communication skills as well. And it's not something where you have to feel I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to blog like every day, or I need to blog like 3 times a week. I think even, doing it every other week. And there's also that thing of repurposing content. I mean, say, for example, this podcast, taking, key talking points from it and turning it into a blog post can definitely help.
Excellent. Thank you.
No, that's good advice. So you've probably had an opportunity to speak with, have conversation with a number of entrepreneurs or entrepreneurial type people over the last little while. Are there 1 or 2 things that have stuck in your mind that you consistently hear from entrepreneurs about what it takes to succeed as an entrepreneur?
I would say mindset, because I think a lot of the times, and we have social media to thank, that we see people portray themselves as successful, but not really showing behind the scenes. So sometimes there's that thing like, okay, I'm gonna start a business and I'm gonna make lots of money from it, and I'm gonna be really successful after a year or 2 only, without realizing how much work, how many years it takes. And I just think back to, and I've had conversations with other entrepreneurs too about the image of the iceberg. Like, and I'm sure also, I think the image has been shown on social media as well, the tip of the iceberg. You see the success. However, underneath the water, there's all the, the long hours, the many nights of, sleepless nights, the stress, things not going well, having to pivot. So yeah, it's really important to have that mindset to keep going, because there will be times when you'll want to quit. And I think it's okay to quit, meaning like take a break for a day or 2, for a few days, but then to kind of like revisit the situation. Because if you're not resilient, or if you don't think positive, then entrepreneurship is going to be even tougher than it already is for you.
Very true.
Absolutely. I like the analogy of the iceberg. My favorite, and I think we may even mention it on the show before, is the one of the duck on the water. That as you see the duck moving across the water, what you see is this calm, serene bird just looking around as if everything is just, again, completely under control. And yet below the water, the feet are just going madly. And that, again, reminds me very much of a lot of entrepreneurs, right? That what you see and what is actually going on below the surface are 2 completely different things.
Mm-hmm. And I think we've always seen that and known that about entrepreneurs. I think social media has really amplified entrepreneurs feeling like they're not keeping up, because social media gives you the highlight reel out of somebody's life and out of somebody's business. They don't tell you all the times that they're staying awake at night wondering about whether or not they can make payroll tomorrow. They're not talking about, I was talking to a gentleman who, with the pandemic, their business has taken off significantly, and he's out there at 3 a.m. making deliveries now, because that's the only time that they can do it. And those aren't the types of things that you ever see a business owner post on their social media. They're going to post all the good things. And so I think it really does amplify for other startups, especially, that they think, well, I must be doing something wrong because no one else is working this hard and no one else is this stressed. So I think it's important for, us in our forum to recognize that, and to remind everybody that everyone struggles at one time or another. If you're trying to grow something, then you are going to experience some challenges.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, for sure. And the struggles can also be very different, right? I mean, the one thing we've learned certainly this year is some businesses have absolutely taken off because of the pandemic, right? I mean, e-commerce has just exploded, which has caused all kinds of challenges for those e-commerce business owners trying to keep up with the orders, trying to manage cash flow, et cetera, et cetera. And then you also have on the other side of the coin businesses where their business literally disappeared overnight. So, same circumstances, right? Same pandemic, but both businesses dealing with incredible challenges for very different reasons. And again, I think that's, that's what happens when you're an entrepreneur, right? Is it the good, the bad? You don't always know what's coming your way. And I certainly don't think there was any entrepreneur out there who saw this coming. So there are things you can plan for, but I don't think you could plan for this one. So
no, not at all. And it was interesting because with our social venture, and I distinctly remember, I think it was about either November or December of last year, we were busy planning for 2020. We were so excited because at that time, everyone was like, it's not only a new year, it's a new decade. It's like 2020. So you're thinking like 2020 vision. And we're like, okay, we planned out like the first 6 months for our events. And of course, like COVID hit. But fortunately, we were able to pivot to events online.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I think it comes back to, again, that, you were willing to adapt and change something because you had to. But there are lots of businesses, and even if we're not talking about the pandemic, that have started on a course, and even though it isn't the right course for them, they're committed to it, and I have my plan, and aren't looking to see whether or not they're on the right course.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just adding to that, because what brings to mind is really well-known big companies, such as, remember, Blockbuster, and then Netflix happened, and then Kodak, and then, of course, like digital photography, digital cameras came into play, but failed to adapt to that. So
you can see the landscape is scattered with companies like that. Those were two great examples as well.
Definitely.
That brings us to the part of the show that we call the Smart Man, Smarter Woman version of James Lipton's Q&A. And that is where we have 6 questions that we ask every one of our guests. We ask the same questions. And if you're ready, Karen, I would like to get started.
Sure.
Okay. What one word best defines an entrepreneur? And you may have already answered that.
Oh, there's so many words. I'm trying to think, like, which one word do I want to say?
Yep.
I would say curiosity.
Okay. What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
So part of my, I guess would say like 10, 15 year plan is to become a venture capitalist, because I would like to invest in other startups and help them grow.
Awesome. What profession would you like never to attempt?
I guess being introverted, I would say being an actor. So kudos to those people who do that full time. I feel I'm more a behind the scenes, behind the camera person.
Awesome. Well, we need those behind the scenes people as well. So what sound or noise do you love?
Oh, sound or noise? Do I have a time or a little bit of time to think about it? Sure. I've never heard that question asked. That's a really interesting question. What sound or noise? You know what? I would say, and this probably would also, this is going to cater to like other senses too, like the smell, just the sound of things being fried.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure if that's the answer.
That's multiple sensory for sure. And with these questions, there is no right or wrong answer. It's that's why we ask them. What book would you recommend for every entrepreneur?
Oh, there's so many books. I love reading books on entrepreneurship and personal development. One book I would say is A Year with Peter Drucker, 52 Weeks of Coaching for Leadership Effectiveness. And I thought what I really liked about this book was that the book was divided, so like each week being a lesson that focused on certain themes of leadership. And not only that, at the end of each chapter, there was a suggested further reading and reflective questions to ask yourself. And I think especially when it comes to books with like business and personal development, that there should be more books like that, like having action items to do at the end of each chapter, like questions you can ask yourself to really kind of help reinforce the concepts.
Okay, great answer. Last question. When your own entrepreneurial journey is completed, what do you hope your legacy is?
The funny thing is, I feel like it'll never end. Like, even let's say, for example, if I say I'm so-called retired, I feel I'll pursue something else. With respect to my legacy, I think I'd like to be remembered, or for people to know me for making an impact, for just helping other people realize their true potential, and that you can do pretty much anything. Like, for example, I was working for the government as a food inspector, and now I'm a blogger, podcaster, social entrepreneur. So I feel, people, I really want to help people realize their potential.
Okay, awesome. And for those listeners that would like to contact you, what is the easiest way for them to connect with you, Karen?
I would say you could message me or follow me on social media. So I tell people I'm mainly active on like Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and my handle on Instagram and Twitter is Makin the Bacon. It's Makin the Bacon with a number 1 at the end, because I tell everybody Makin the Bacon was already taken. Like the handle Makin the Bacon, like I couldn't have it. And the person, I tried to reach out to the person, if I could even buy their handle, and of course, no response. So like just reach out to me on social media, and then on LinkedIn, it's my full name, so Karen, Karen. Also spell out my last name because it's very hard. Like, even sometimes I forget how to spell it. SWYSZCZ.
Okay, there's a lot of consonants there.
Yep.
And so before we close out this episode, do you have any final thoughts, Karen, you might like to share with our audience?
Hold on. Before you close it out, you have not mentioned that Karen has a book coming out. So at least, I know that we're at the end of it, but at least, Karen, please share for our audience the name of your book. By the time this episode is released, it will be already out. But if you could let everybody know the name of your book and why they should read it.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much, Juliet, for the opportunity. So it's called Light in the North, and it actually launched last month. So it is available at like Chapters, Indigo, for those in the US, Barnes & Noble, and then Amazon.ca. So it is a collection of stories of women across Canada. It's a diverse group of women of many different cultures. And we share stories of what it was like growing up in Canada and what it means to be a woman in Canada.
Excellent. Thank
Awesome.
you. Okay, go ahead, Steve. Now you can close it up.
Thank you. You're going to stop directing the show now. I thought you were taking over. You did an awesome job there, by the way. That's maybe we have a new role there for you.
I'm a behind the scenes kind of person.
You're a behind the scenes kind of girl. Okay. Anyway, as I was mentioning, do you have any final thoughts, Karen, you might like to share with our audience of entrepreneurs?
I would say to not wait for opportunities to come to you, because the thing is, if you wait, it may never happen, or the opportunity may never come your way. So really take action, and if anything, any action, even though you're not sure, it's not how you plan, any action taken is better than no action taken at all.
Awesome. And what about you, Juliet? Do you have any final thoughts before we close out the episode?
No, I think I've already interrupted and directed enough. So
I wouldn't be an interruption. I did it. If you're good, that's fine. And I do have to say that what a wonderful segue, Karen. This brings us to the part of the show where I have a quote that I like to share. And you didn't know what the quote was going to be when you said your last few words there, your final thoughts. And I thought, as you were speaking, I thought, she's reading my quote. So here is my quote. Do not wait. Does that sound familiar, Karen? Do not wait. The time will never be just right. Start where you stand. Work with whatever tools you may have at your command, and better tools will be found as you go along. By George Herbert.
Awesome.
I thought that was funny when you said that. It was great. So anyway, thank you very much, Karen. Really appreciate you joining us. Thank you very much to my awesome co-host, Juliet. But most importantly, thank you to you, our audience, for giving us a listen. We sincerely hope you found some value here. And if you did, please subscribe. We would love it if you did. We're in all the normal places, iTunes, Spotify, or you can go to our website, smartmansmarterwoman.com. And thank you again. Until next time, take good care of yourself and those that you love. Bye for now.